So when we look at market failure, there are many kinds of market failure. The first market failure we want to talk about, or we talked about, is basically externalities, which is basically your third party cost or benefit, right? And this externality basically means that you are going to see deadweight losses to happen. Uh, Either there is over provision in the case of uh, externalities that are negative, right? Or there is under provision, which means externalities are positive, you know. And because these are third party costs and benefits, the market ignores it. So we say this to the market will failure. The market will not lead to the social efficiency if the actions of the producers or consumers affect people other than themselves. In other words, when there is externalities or side effects, be it positive or negative, market failure rises and therefore government intervention is required. How can we have the government to intervene? We'll sort of see that in a little while. The second market failure, guys, is what we call monopoly power or market power. So whenever markets are imperfect, for example, whether it's monopoly or monopsony, we saw the market will fail to socially optimum level. And I want to show you this diagram that we've done this in the other chapter. Remember, this was your demand and supply. This is supply under perfect competition. This is demand. So if this market was under perfect competition, you would produce at this point X, right? Where price will be P2 and the quantity will be Q2. If you look at consumer surplus will be area 1 plus 2 plus 3. Why? Because आपकी price P2 है, your price is P2, demand curve is downward sloping, so this area 1, 2, 3 becomes my consumer surplus. And my producer surplus, guys, will be area 4 plus 5, right? So in my area 4 plus 5 is my producer surplus. And if this was, so this is under perfect competition, right? But if this market was under monopoly, guys, what will happen if this market becomes monopoly or monopolized? Anyone? What will happen under monopoly, guys? Any question? Anyone? What will be my consumer surplus versus producer surplus? Any guesses, guys? Consumer surplus will be area 1, very good, because price is P1. Producer surplus will be Umema. What will be my producer surplus? Producer surplus will be area 2 plus 5, very good. So 2 plus 5 is my producer surplus. And what's my deadweight loss, guys? My deadweight loss will be area 3 plus 4. So when you look at monopoly produces at a higher price, have a lower quantity, and creates a deadweight loss. Is this a case of over provision or under provision? Guys, is this a case of over provision or under provision? Remember, what do you think it is? Under provision. Very good. The market isn't producing enough. So that's why this is a case of under provision. Very good. And that's why we need to correct this through government intervention. We saw that, by the way. The government could come up with a P2 price or marginal cost pricing and do a lot of stuff which can make this situation to improve. Make sense, guys? The third one is basically called imperfect information. You know, when you look at markets, if the markets need to work properly, we need to make sure that information is perfect and symmetrical. What do we mean by symmetrical information? Symmetrical information means both consumers and producers have to have the same level of knowledge about the product and they know everything there is to know about them. So, for example, if I go to a shop and say the guy sees me and finds that I don't have much of experience, and let's say the price of the good was rupees 100, when he sees me, because he figured out that I don't have enough knowledge, he may sell it for 150 or 160 or 200 rupees, or sell me a good which is not actually good, so or has some issues with it. So the idea goes is that people, when they have asymmetrical information. One party has more information than the other. That one party who has more information can exploit the other party. So in many cases, information is asymmetric or incomplete or unequal, and producers may know more than consumers, or incomplete or imperfect knowledge. And in these situations, we have what we call a market failure. And in such a case, guys, you may see consumers to end up suffering. So in the private healthcare market, doctors know more than the patients about healthcare and treatment. So there is again asymmetric, and we rely on that. I mean, also like in the school market, maybe you can say teachers may know more than the consumers or students. So there is an incentive, therefore, for doctors to prescribe more expensive treatment that is necessary to increase their profit. So, like the other day, I took my dog to a vet, and the vet was like, we have to uh, treat. Well, he did a test, first of all, which was expensive. He did a test, and he said, oh, the test is negative, but still we believe that we should get him treated for a particular kind of a sort of problem. So you can see in such a case, the producer, the doctor is giving you an advice, and you will follow it because you have less information available, and that's kind of like inefficient use of resources. Why? Because you're actually ending up with a situation where you may buy a treatment which is not needed. So many consumers in the healthcare market sometimes take out insurance to help pay for treatments, like expensive treatment. Uh, However, this leads to a problem of moral hazard. The key word we need to use here is what we call moral hazard. What is moral hazard? Moral hazard is basically where uh, they take more risk and therefore require more treatment because they are insured. So, for example, if you get your car insured, right, and because you are insured, you might end up taking more risk, would be basically a case of inefficiency as well. Why? Because, or for example, let's say if I'm a smoker and I go and to get myself insured. Now there is a moral hazard here. Why? Because I'm a more riskier case, right? And I'm taking insurance and probably knowing that now I'm insured, I'm also getting basically what you call more sort of chances. A lot of people also said this, that vaccination, are they going to solve the problem or are they going to increase cases? Because a lot of times people who are getting vaccinated feel that they have immunity against COVID, and they end up having more of a normal life and less of social distancing. So that's also a case that is happening. So I don't know, maybe while vaccine have the advantage of providing you protection, there could be an issue of it causing what you call it um, Munib, can you close your camera as well, my friend? That'll be nice. Thank you, Munib. So guys, the idea goes this, that just guys give me 1 minute. So when it comes to asymmetric information, that becomes a market failure as well, because one party has more information than the other. Also, guys, in many markets, such as tobacco, alcohol, and pension markets, providers of these goods and services sometimes withhold information deliberately from consumers. For example, I'm not going to tell you how much tobacco can be harmful for you, um, and I'm not going to tell you, for example, in alcohol market also how much it's bad for you to drink alcohol, for example, or in pension market, basically, where can you get the maximum possible return or so on, right? So the idea goes is that um, when you look at products, in fact, a lot of times Nestle got into trouble, like they were promoting uh, the powder milk to be actually more beneficial than mother's milk, and they did that advertising for many years until the regulator said, you know what, the research points something else, and you guys are fooling the industry, and that they stopped doing that. So you are looking at a case of what we call problem of basically misinforming people, and that could basically be another issue of market failure. In the pension market, many consumers do not understand the working of the pension market. That there's so many funds out there, and you don't even know whether the fund that you're putting your money in is it risky or not. And sometimes a lot of people lose money because suddenly they are told to put in a fund that is much more riskier. Make sense? So that could be information failure. Then comes, guys, the failure of public goods. Public goods, remember, are non-rival, if you remember from AS, and they are non-excludable. Non-rival basically means consumption by one person will leave less for another, will not leave less for another, and that's the case of street light. If I use it, less of it will not be available for others. Also, it's non-excludable, which means once it's provided, you can't stop those who pay and those who do not pay. And as a result, nobody pays. And because nobody pays, the market is failing because there is no provision here. In the case of public goods, there is no provision. And therefore, because of no provision in the case of public goods, you will see an issue of basically uh, government to intervene because government has to provide these goods, right? So non-rival and non-excludable results in basically these goods to be underprovided in the market. Make sense? Any question about public goods, guys? Okay, the other kinds of failures that we want to talk about is basically called factor mobility or immobility. Sometimes factors cannot move from one occupation to another because of geographical reason or because of occupational reason, or sometimes there is time lags. And what both of these factors will do is this, that they will be basically uh, market disequilibrium for a long time. So the time lags in adjustment leads to a permanent state of disequilibrium, and hence the social optimum level is never achieved. A good example of this is, for example, guys, normally we say, let's say the demand for labor goes up, the supply will catch up. But what if the supply doesn't catch up as quickly as demand? Then this would mean there will always be some party benefiting from it, and the price can be very likely to remain high in those cases. Make sense? So whenever there is a imperfect sort of competition, there could be issues like, for example, these kind of factor mobility and time lags that can happen. Okay, make sense, guys? Then comes, guys, merit and demerit goods. We've done that also in AS. Remember, merit and demerit goods have two features that basically are combined together. Number one, merit goods, we say, have positive externality, right? Alongside positive externality, there is an information failure. Similarly, for demerit goods, guys, for demerit goods, there is a negative externality plus information failure. So both these facts are happening together, right? And the idea goes is that um, cigarettes is a demerit good. There is a negative externality. You harm others when there's passive smoking, but there's also an information failure because the benefit of smoking may happen today, but the cost is incurred in the future. Similarly, for merit goods, like for example, when you look at education, the benefit may happen in the future, but the cost is today. So there is an information failure, and merit goods lead to what we call under provision, and demerit goods lead to what we call over provision. Make sense? So this is another challenge that happens, and therefore government may need to intervene in the case of merits and demerit goods as well. Right? Uh, Lastly, guys, there are other shortcomings. Free market can lead to what we call income distribution to become unfair, the social efficiency. So there's always a question about more equitable distribution of wealth and so on. The rich can become richer, the poor can become poor when economies are growing, and that could be bad for the society. Make sense? Now, guys, how does government intervene is another thing that we need to look at. Before I talk about how does government intervene, do we have any questions? Anyone, any questions? Are we good to move on? Okay, guys, let's talk about let's talk about now the government intervention. When we look at government intervention, when we look at government intervention, government can intervene in many ways, but on a bigger level, government can intervene on three ways. Number one, they can make policies that are using the market system. So they're trying to make the demand and supply become better. For example, when you look at taxes or subsidies, they are the policies that are using the market system. How? For example, when you put a tax, the price goes up, the quantity goes down. In the case of negative externality, that could work well. For subsidies, you are making the give a subsidy, and using the market force of demand supply, the supply curve will shift to the right, price will go down, and the quantity will go up. So policies using market system is one way of going about it. Then there are policies improving the market system. So they are designed to change the structure of the market. So first one is using demand and supply forces. The other one is trying to make the structure become better, like competition policy or removing trade restrictions, for example. So they are trying to basically increase the market forces of demand supply role in the provision of goods, right? So for example, let's say rather than government deciding quotas, the government allows the market to operate more freely, or you allow more competition to happen. All of these are basically things that can improve the overall standard of living. Then comes policies designed to um, extra market policies. So extra market policies are basically policies, they are beyond the market. So for example, when you look at like price mechanism, provision of public goods, that is done through over and above the market because the market fails to provide it completely. Or what if government decides to own, let's say, K Electric? That would be basically over and above the market policies. You don't use the market forces, the demand supply. So three kinds of policies. Number one is those that are trying to improve the market, those that are trying to use the market system, and those that are above the market or extra market or over and beyond the market because you are intervening to solve the problem. Okay, so what are those policies? Let's quickly walk through some today. Let's do taxes and subsidies and look at their advantages and disadvantages quickly. The first one is taxes. So guys, if you look at the diagram for externalities, and I want to draw the diagram for negative externality and positive. And I'm doing it because this comes in exams, in MCQs a lot. So let's say this is my demand supply, okay? And let's say the price is P naught, the quantity is Q naught, okay? And there is a negative externality of production. So this is my marginal social cost. This is my marginal private cost, right? So this is the quantity you should produce. And because you're not producing that, there is a deadweight loss equal to this area, like A, B, C. What the government could do is basically put a tax, right? So if I put a tax equal to this externality, so let's put this MSC becomes my new supply curve, which is equal to S naught plus T. When you put a tax, supply curve will shift backward. The new quantity will be this. Automatically, Q star will become my socially desirable quantity. So when you put a tax equal to externality, you are able to solve the problem of negative externality because the quantity will fall, right? So using the market force of demand supply, I've been able to put a tax. Similarly, what if this is happening? What if there's a positive externality? So let's look at a positive externality on the demand side. Okay, and this also comes a lot in exams. Uh, okay, now if the demand should be more, let's say demand should be like here, like vaccine, right? So this is my marginal social benefit. The problem is this, that if everyone goes and get vaccinated, there will be a problem of course, quantity to be Q1, but the price may go up. Currently, something what is happening in Pakistan, if you look at it, the market price of vaccine could be really high if it's allowed to operate freely. What the government can do is this: the government will be like, okay, at Q naught there is this externality taking place, there is this amount. How about we give a subsidy? We give a subsidy. How much subsidy? That will make the supply curve, this supply curve go all the way here. The advantage of giving a subsidy will be supply curve will shift to the right, quantity will become the socially desirable level, Q, let's call it Q star, and the price also goes down to P star. So when you give a subsidy, you are able to basically get an advantage here, that you are able to make sure that the supply shifts to the right and the socially desirable level of quantity becomes the quantity, and that's kind of like uh, a win-win for kind of like consumers as well, because producers won't be unhappy because they'll be like, yeah, government is subsidizing, so we're getting P dash minus P star subsidy, and so they will be also very happy to begin with. Make sense? Are we good? Any questions? So, guys, awesome. So, how does the subsidies and taxes work? Uh, one of the advantage of basically, uh, or what are the advantages and disadvantages of taxes and subsidies? So, one of the advantages of taxes is this, that, or subsidies is that they are letting the market to operate. They allow the market to operate, which means you're using the market forces of demand supply. So that's the first advantage. Number two, uh, it is also very adjustable. You know, like the bigger the problem, the bigger the tax. The smaller the problem, the smaller the tax. The bigger the problem, you know, you may want to sort of give bigger subsidy, and so on. You know, that kind of a thing. Are we good? Does that make sense, guys? Any questions about this? Similarly, um, if firms are taxed for polluting, for example, they are encouraged to find cleaner ways. So you know this, that if you tax a firm, that firm will realize that, you know what, I can't run away from causing a harm to the society. Why don't I just find a cleaner way so that I'm not taxed anymore? So tax kind of like acts as an incentive in the long run to change behavior for people. Likewise, if you subsidize good practices, then you are basically allowing. So, for example, let's say you say this, that people who are getting vaccinated can only be allowed to travel. You know, let's say you come up with this rule, you will see a lot more people vaccinated, and that could be, you know, incentivizing the good behavior. The problem of course, taxes is this, that it's infeasible to use different tax and subsidy rates. Each firm basically have a different level of pollution. For example, let's say firm A versus firm B might be doing. And if you come up with the same tax for everyone, that's kind of like unfair. Because what if I pollute less and what if some other firm pollute more? And yet we both end up paying the same tax because we are in the same industry. So, from an administrative perspective, it's very difficult and expensive to charge every vendor its own particular tax rate. And that's why it's it's problematic to begin with, because a lot of times the same taxes are applied to people without much of administration. Secondly, it is difficult to figure out the marginal sort of cost, external cost. So if we are unable to figure out externality, or the size of externality, we may not be able to figure out how much tax we put. You know, what if I under or overtax? Because figuring out or monetizing the value of externality is kind of like a difficult process to begin with. Thirdly, guys, uh, if you look at indirect taxes, if you look at from AS discussion, we also looked at indirect taxes to be, regressive in nature, and also we saw it's inflationary. Remember, so they are inflationary in nature and regressive nature, which becomes also a problem against uh, taxes and subsidies. Make sense? Are we good? So these are some of the arguments pros and for and against the taxes and subsidy. Now the rest of the things are, let's look at it tomorrow. Tomorrow, let's look at all of these other discussions. Okay, and we will the day after tomorrow try to sort of wrap this up. Agar if there's something that's left, we may end up doing an extra uh, class for things. Okay. Any questions, guys? Thanks, Umema. Thanks, everyone else. Have a good day, and I'll see you, inshallah, tomorrow. Uh, I will teach my class online tomorrow as well, okay? So, tomorrow and Thursday, we'll keep it online as well. Thanks, guys. No chapter is not finished. We have some parts of the chapter left. So inshallah, 2 days we will try to wrap it up, and otherwise we'll keep one extra class, and that will be good for us to cover everything. Okay. Have a good one, guys. Bye bye.